What's up everybody, this is Master Ian Gamer. Overwatch Spotlight revealed 10 new heroes, 5 of which will be releasing with Season 1, and 5 more which will be releasing 1 per season for the 5 following seasons over the course of 2026. Now, while we've already gotten a pretty in-depth look at the immediate 5 heroes who will be joining the roster, in this video today I wanted to take a deeper look at the 5 additional heroes, those who have so far only really been depicted via silhouettes, with not much clear emphasis from Blizzard themselves as for who they are or how they're going to function as a hero. But as you might imagine, there have been a number of teasers, Easter eggs, and little hints placed throughout both the Spotlight and following lore drops that actually give us a pretty good idea who at least some of them are very likely to end up being. So let's just go through season by season and take a look at who exactly will be coming out over the remainder of 2026 and what exactly they might be bringing to the game. Alright, so before we jump into the actual roadmap of each of the 5 remaining heroes, it's actually important for us to take a quick look at the comic which released shortly after Spotlight, showcasing Vendetta's first big orders of business now that she's the head of Talon. Her plans as the new head involve several steps and several key associations with other existing Overwatch universe factions, many of which appear to be directly tied to the upcoming heroes we're going to be getting for the remainder of this year. The key factions worth focusing on are the Deadlock Gang, which of course is led by Ashe, and will be aiding Talon in infiltrating the old Overwatch watchpoint, Grand Mesa, which is now under the control of Helix Securities. The next is the Hashimoto, the Yakuza-type faction in Japan, who serves as the main antagonist for Kiriko, Genji, and Hanzo, who has recently taken control of Tokyo with the assistance of Talon reinforcements in exchange for blades, crafted by Kiriko's father, who has been imprisoned by the Hashimoto for several years at this point. And the third major faction of note is the Junkers, who will be visited shortly by Malga in order to negotiate some kind of alliance between them and Talon. Now, there's certainly more covered in the comic than just these 3 faction relations, but they're the big ones that we want to focus on here, specifically when it comes to looking at the next specific 3 heroes we're going to be getting over the course of 2026. Again, there are 5 more heroes we'll be getting, but 3 seem to have the most setup so far, and so we're going to give the biggest focus to those, but don't worry, we will be covering all 5. So getting started now, jumping into the first hero that'll be releasing of the 5 silhouettes, we have this character set to release in Season 2. Now, when it comes to concrete information we have on them thus far, the big thing to go on is that it is confirmed to be a damage hero. This was confirmed by one of the Overwatch developers in an interview from the Spotlight event, so that is concrete information that, unless they somehow misspoke during the interview or got something wrong, is safe to say this is a damage hero. Additionally, the silhouette itself seems to depict a woman wearing some sort of beret with long braided hair, holding a large gun with some sort of prongs at the end of it, and accompanied by what looks to be some sort of bird-shaped flying drone. Now, beyond just the silhouette itself, there's some key details to take note of in this specific season when shown on the officially published roadmap. Not only do we see the hero themselves being listed as the Season 2 hero, but the banner above them clearly depicts the map Route 66, a map which of course is very heavily associated with the Deadlock Gang, who, as I mentioned, is one of the factions aiding Talon with infiltrating Watchpoint Grand Mesa. Now, I don't think it's any coincidence that they happen to show Route 66 here of all maps, and suggests to me that the established plot point involving the Deadlock Gang will be a major focus of this season, which could easily then be extended to the hero that'll be releasing during it. And as it just so happens, when it comes to the Deadlock Gang, there's actually a known member of Deadlock who seems to fit the depicted character here pretty well, that being Frankie. Frankie is a character that was first introduced in the Ashe novel Deadlock Rebels a number of years ago. We've never seen an actual image of what Frankie looks like, but she is described in the novel itself as a dark-skinned woman with round features, a sturdy build, and short, twisted, curly lavender hair, who wears a pair of round, rimless hollow glasses and utilizes micro-drones for communication and recon. Additionally, she's one of the original founders of the Deadlock Gang and is a skilled hacker. Additionally, with the release of the Powder Keg Mine Stadium map this past year, we can actually see her name present on the walls of one of the buildings near the Deadlock Gang's hideout where they're gathering intel on Watchpoint Grand Mesa. So the question then is the silhouette depicted here that of Frankie, yet another Deadlock Gang member who's going to be joining the roster as a playable hero and ties directly into the upcoming plot point of the Deadlock Gang helping Talon infiltrate Grand Mesa? To me, it seems very likely. There are some key things to note though, mainly the difference in terms of her physical description, specifically when it comes to the hair, as Frankie in the novel is described as having short hair, but the Frankie we see here looks to have an exceptionally long braid. But there are a couple explanations for this. The first and simplest explanation is that Blizzard may have just retconned Frankie's design when adding her as a playable hero. I mean, we've never even actually seen an image of Frankie before, and considering what they've just done with Anrin, Blizzard clearly isn't shy about changing the appearance of a character if they feel a different design better fits the hero in-game. So just retconning Frankie to have a longer hairstyle just to give her perhaps a more unique silhouette or whatever reason they may have for doing it seems like a more than realistic possibility for this given character. The other possibility though is that the long braid we see trailing down here isn't actually a braid and might not even be her hair at all, but instead might be some sort of equipment which she's carrying with her. Judging by the position of her left arm here, it looks like she's holding something over her shoulder, and also seems to line up exactly where the braid kind of connects to the top part of her body, indicating that instead of a braid, it's perhaps some sort of rope or cable that just happens to look like a braid, given the nature of it being a silhouette. If so, then it's likely to be a major part of her kit and character design, given how prominent it is in this silhouette, and as such would likely tie to one of her abilities, much like the drone we clearly see flying over her shoulder. It's tough to say. At the end of the day, the simpler explanation is probably that they just retconned her design for whatever reason. But either way, if you were to ask me to put money on who this next upcoming hero is likely to be, it more than likely to me seems like it will indeed be Frankie, a hero that is not only established within the lore, but has even been additionally teased within the past year, and would align perfectly with the current story beats that Blizzard seems to be putting into motion. But now, moving on from Season 2, let's get on to Season 3. This is where we see the introduction of another character, one who looks to be a female with Oni horns poking out of the top of her head, a large handgun of sorts as her weapon, which visually, especially in combination with her pose, is very reminiscent of Diva's pistol, along with some sort of bulky pouches or something or another prominently sticking out on either side of her hips. Now, once again, considering the banner at the top of this season's roadmap section, we see the new map Tokyo, which we now know from the recent comic is where the Hashimoto gang have recently taken control and are occupying as their new territory. And considering that many of the Hashimoto wear horned masks, I think it is very safe to say that this character specifically is a member of the Hashimoto, much like Mizuki, who was released as a part of the initial 5 in Season 1. Now, while we don't have a confirmed role for this character like we do for the hero releasing in Season 2, I think it's more than likely that this specific character is going to be a support. Not only does she have a fairly simple design, not looking to be bulky like that of a tank, but the hero immediately before her is confirmed to be a damage hero, and without touching too much yet on the character coming after her, well, that's definitely going to be a tank. So, third role in the middle, likely to be a support. Unlike Frankie, though, from the previous season, we don't have any particularly strong leads on whether or not this is going to be an established character coming to join the roster, as opposed to a total newcomer. At this point, I'd wager it's more than likely going to be a newcomer, just because they don't really fit the description or any sort of defining characteristics of another hero we've had established, on top of the fact that the Hashimoto as a faction is one of the lesser fleshed out groups in the Overwatch universe, and doesn't really have any notable level named characters in it who this even could really be. The only other major plot point, again going to the comic, is that we know the Hashimoto is specifically utilizing Kiriko's father in order to craft blades for Vendetta, so possibly this character could connect in with that. Her gun looks to have possibly a little blade on the underside of its barrel, maybe even almost like a bayonet of sorts, though it doesn't even extend beyond the muzzle. So perhaps that'll end up tying in with either her design or abilities in some fashion. But either way, out of the 3 character silhouettes we see for this roadmap, this character specifically is by far the one which we have the least to go on at this point. And so I'm gonna leave it at there for her and move on to the third, and for a lot of people, most exciting character we have coming over the remaining course of 2026, being D.Mon. Yes, I'm not even going to toy around with whether or not this is D.Mon. This is literally D.Mon, the fellow Mecha Squad member that we've seen pop up a number of times over the years and has been a big fan favorite in terms of people clamoring for her to be a playable hero someday. And it looks like that day will be coming this year. As if the silhouette itself wasn't reminiscent enough of D.Mon's massive mech, which we've seen in both cinematics, concept art, and even in-game on the mecha-based Busan map, but also during the Spotlight event itself, in the background of one of the segments, we can see clearly a concept image of D.Mon's mech. Now, it's notable that this specific image is actually different from the one we've had released previously of D.Mon, as it looks like her mech has been partially redesigned to be less bulky and instead now a bit more humanoid and streamlined, which would make sense considering that the original D.Mon mech is massive, so big that it wouldn't even fit through many doorways on the existing Overwatch maps. So it makes sense that they would redesign D.Mon's mech to better fit as an actual hero, and is likely why we're seeing a new iteration of its concept artwork here in this image. Now, as I mentioned earlier, D.Mon almost certainly is going to be a tank. The sheer size of the character's mech is a dead giveaway for that, and I would be shocked if they could find any way to make this anything other than a tank. So yeah, I'm gonna safely say this is a tank. However, perhaps the most interesting thing about D.Mon being the hero releasing in Season 4 is, again, looking at the roadmap and the story buildup we've had in the comic. The banner at the top of Season 4 depicts Junker Queen and Diva. Now, Diva makes sense because both her and D.Mon are part of Mecha Squad. They're teammates, and thus only further indicates the idea that yes, this is indeed D.Mon. But Junker Queens suggests that Season 4 is when we're also going to see the story plot point of Mauga visiting the Junkers. And while there's no guarantee that that element of the story plot point has to tie in to the new hero that's being released during it, I can't help but wonder if it will. After all, the Junkers are renowned for their mech fighting arena, the Scrapyard, which we saw Junker Queen herself fighting in during her animated short, despite her not actually having a mech, and was a major part of especially early Junker lore. So the fact that we're also just so happening to get a mech hero being added the same season, does this indicate that D.Mon is somehow going to be connected with the Junkers, or at least play a role in whatever story beat ends up happening here with Talon, Mauga, and everything else? I'm honestly not too sure. This could easily just end up being a hero that's not even particularly tied to the story beat happening in this season. Maybe D.Mon is just popular enough that they want to add her as a hero, and they're just going to be independent of Mauga visiting the Junkers. But it does certainly make you wonder, and I am very curious to see what all Blizzard might have in store here. Now, having covered the 3 silhouettes, which are clearly visible on the Spotlight roadmap, now we get to the far more ambiguous portion of the year, post-Season 4, where we're supposedly still going to be getting 2 new heroes, both of whom have silhouettes in this image, but with much, much less to go on in terms of who they are and how they connect to the existing storyline. For starters, we don't really have any other major factions acknowledged in the comic that released after Spotlight. The Deadlock Gang, Hashimoto, and Junkers were the prominent ones, with Vishkar kind of playing in a little bit in its own way, but we don't have any clear indication for who these other two heroes might be in terms of connecting to Vendetta's ongoing plans with the story. So we're really going to be left to just analyze them based on their silhouettes alone, without too much more beyond that. And starting with my favorite of not only these last two, but possibly all 5 of the silhouettes we see here, is the character who I've come to call Omnic Noire, a character who appears to be an Omnic, judging by the dots on their face, that's wearing a trench coat, hat, and carrying a cane. A very, very noir-coded character. Now, unfortunately, there's next to nothing to go on in terms of who this is going to be. It doesn't fit the description of any known characters within the Overwatch universe. There's no key visual traits or characteristics that stand out as being linkable to any particular existing faction or other heroes. They're very nebulous. They could be just about anything. They could be a hero, they could be a villain, they could be somewhere in between, they could be affiliated with an existing major faction, or maybe affiliated with no one other than themselves. They are a very curious character, and honestly I wish I had more to speculate about in terms of who exactly this is, because I absolutely love their design, but they're really just a mystery, and there isn't much more to go on other than just the cool look of their outfit and one possible teaser from the spotlight itself. Just like the concept artwork we saw of D.Mon in the background of one of the shots from the Spotlight trailer, in that same portion of the Spotlight, we get an image of this character. A character who very clearly looks to be an Omnic, judging by their gray head, but doesn't seem to match the design of any existing Overwatch heroes. Now, this is very clearly not the character in question from the silhouette, as they're not wearing a trench coat, hat, or have a cane, but they are vaguely within the realm of what we would imagine this character might look like when wearing a different outfit, such as a different skin. The outfit itself looks to be some sort of formal type outfit, largely being pink, with an interesting icon on the right, which is reminiscent of some sort of Oni demon type skull, and thus is potentially linked to the Hashimoto. If this is in fact the Omnic Noire character, it could indicate that, like the Season 3 hero, they have some affiliation with the Hashimoto, or at the very least, just this skin might be based on the Hashimoto, and not actually connect to any of their actual in-game story, lore, and connections. But it's also totally unclear whether this is the character at all. Perhaps this is a Zenyatta skin, where for some reason they depict him standing like a normal human instead of levitating. But regardless, it is a very curious detail to take note of, and might be the only thing we have to go on for Omnic Noire other than the silhouette itself. And this then takes us to the final silhouette of the hero roster for 2026, being another very mysterious character, who again, we don't have too much to go on here, but at least seems to be a bit more familiar than Omnic Noire. At a glance, this character, to me, looks very reminiscent to the Null Sector Stalker enemies, one of the enemy types from the PvE invasion missions, largely due to its feminine body shape, and especially the weird sort of braid type thing we see on the right. Additionally, there's a very good chance that this silhouette is that of another Omnic, as the feet specifically look to not be human, simply put. They look like Omnic feet, basically, and it is possible that this is a human who just has prosthetic legs, since it's by no means a rare occurrence within the Overwatch universe, but overall, I strongly suspect this is going to be another Omnic character. Now, a key thing to mention is that while it does have a surface level similarity to the Stalker I mentioned, I don't think it's supposed to actually be one. For example, the braid type thing I mentioned being a strong visual similarity, here looks to actually be a disjointed sort of collection of levitating chunks. Be they crystals or weird nanite type things, it's unclear, but they do seem to be specifically orbiting around and sort of going up and down their left arm, suggesting that the hero probably has the ability to manipulate these to some extent, maybe firing them out, maybe holding them up like a shield, maybe sending them off to heal an ally. why? There's really no way of knowing at this point, but it is a very prominent and distinct feature of this character, along with the weapon they're holding over their shoulder, which, considering the pose and the shape of this weapon, does look very similar to Widowmaker's rifle, and overall gives the character themselves a strong sniper feel. Now, it's also worth noting these strange sort of pronged portions on the left side of the weapon, and much like the Season 2 hero, it's kind of hard to tell what exactly these are a part of. Are they a part of the weapon they're holding? Are they part of their arm? Are they something weirdly coming off their head or upper torso? Given the nature of it being a silhouette, we can't really say for sure, but it is once again a distinct feature that stands out about this character. And unfortunately, beyond that, I don't know if there's much we can say. Maybe they are a Stalker that somehow split ways with Null Sector and became its own entity, outdoing things. Maybe it's not even an Omnic at all. Maybe it's something completely different. Again, not much to say on this one. It's very mysterious as for what this is going to be, but is certainly one that I am curious to learn more about as time goes on. Now, it is also worth noting that based on the roadmap we see here leading up to fall of 2026, the roadmap, while not given a specific date, seems to cut off roughly around the time of BlizzCon, which will be taking place in September of this year. So I'm willing to bet that, at least when it comes to the latter two silhouettes, Omnic Noire and the Stalker type character, we're probably going to be, if not having them revealed at BlizzCon, at least getting more information about them at that time. As it seems Blizzard is very deliberately holding off on giving us any clear-cut information on what to expect for the Overwatch roadmap past that point in time. But at least leading up to BlizzCon, we still have 3 whole upcoming seasons, each with a new hero that I for one am very curious to get to learn about. Given the heavy emphasis on story we seem to be getting again at this point, I'm very curious to see to what degree we get these characters built up ahead of their respective seasons, and how big of a role each of them individually are going to end up playing in the story beats laying out in the Vendetta comic, where we get the first look at her plans. Is the idea that every single hero releasing this year is going to directly tie into the story? Or maybe some of them are just going to get added because Blizzard thinks they're cool, and the player base likely will too. Either way, that does it for this video. This has been a very long-winded, very in-depth look at the upcoming characters, and I would love to hear your thoughts on all this in the comments down below. Do you think I'm on track with the upcoming heroes being Frankie, a Hashimoto character, and D.Mon? Or do you have your own theories about who they are and how they're tying into the current story? As always, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below, and be sure to subscribe, hit up that bell icon, follow me on X, and join my Discord server to hang out and never miss any future Overwatch 2 news streams and other content. Special thanks to my YouTube channel members who help make these videos possible, and if you'd like to join them to earn some cool rewards, then just hit that join button down below. Otherwise, this is Master Ian Gamer signing off. I'm excited to jump into this year of Overwatch, and I certainly hope you are too. So until next time, have a great day.